How's everyone doing? I'm Chris Lopez, your union brother on TikTok, Instagram, all the platforms. Welcome to a special edition of Union or Bust. Nurses in November. We're platforming nurses. I don't know about you, but I've been in the hospital a few times. And well, I don't think you can have nurses in November without Nurse Erica, uh, TikTok star, Instagram star, registered nurse, board certified. Anyway, Nurse Erica, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've been excited about this because we're going to talk about some of my favorite stuff, unions and organizing, right? But my name's Erica. I'm a registered nurse, like you said. I started a million years ago as a certified nursing assistant right out of high school and then went back to school to become an RN and went back to school a couple more times along the way. My background is primarily in pediatrics, all thing peds related, pediatric oncology, you name it. I did transition into leadership several years ago. And then from there, I transitioned from bedside to hospice. And so now I do kind of like consulting work for program development for pediatric hospice.
Very, very cool. And you have your own podcast also called the Nurses Uncorked Podcast. I checking it out. Number one nursing podcast. So
Oh, thank
you
you.
it's really cool. Like you're so you have your job and then you do this podcast and we started this podcast to platform the labor movement. We want kitchen table economics. We always say on the Union or Bust podcast, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I started it with my friend Juan Perez, and we've been doing it for I think going on 2 years. We're, and it's just exciting, and I'm really excited we got you on the podcast. I didn't think we were going to get you, but we were able to get you. So
Why? Why didn't you think you'd be able to get me? I think I
well,
immediately said hell yes when you asked,
well,
didn't I?
it's just like sometimes, we do a lot of cross pollination on social media. I know we always like share each other's stuff. I'll share your stuff, but there's a lot of people on there that it's like, is this guy legit or is this gal legit? So
Yeah,
anyway,
social
uh,
media is a treacherous place, but
it is,
I,
it
I
is.
think we have a lot in common because you and I both started a podcast with a friend of ours. I have a co-host, Nurse Jessica Seitz, and we're going on about 2 years. I think you started a little bit before us, but yeah, I love
So
it.
if someone wanted to get into nursing, do they have to love chemistry? Is that one of the big things?
It's usually a required course
Mhm.
for your bachelor's of science in nursing. Typically, they're going to want at least a lower level chemistry class, but all the other sciences as well, microbiology, biology, anatomy and physiology, different levels of that. I mean, you name it, we have to take all of the sciences. So you don't have to love it, but you have to be able to have a working understanding and get through it.
I think the only thing I remember in chemistry is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. That's a mole. I think that's about as far as I can go. And I took a class on human genetics, and what I remember is DNA has adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and it's a double helix. But that's about all I got.
That's pretty good.
So, but anyway, tell us, what are your shifts? Are you a night crew nurse? Do you work all different hours? You know, what is what do you do? What's a day for Nurse Erica?
Every day is different. I kind of make my own schedule. I'd say about two-thirds of the time I'm able to make my own schedule because I do more like program development and consulting stuff now. I am not full-time by the traditional definition. So even though I work more than full-time hours most weeks, I do my own benefits outside of work and I have the freedom to, if there's a strike, for example, and of course we don't get much notice if there's going to be a strike, I have the advantage that I can let my job know, hey, I'm not going to be there the end of the week. And most of the time, I'm able to wrangle that with a few exceptions. So, they wanted, I will say, they wanted to keep me around, and that's what I negotiated for myself, was freedom of scheduling. So when I work, it can be 3 in the morning, it can be, Saturday, Wednesday, 9 it just doesn't matter. It's whenever I get around to doing it, but I'm always trying to utilize any spare time that I have.
Well, that's really cool. And, um, we talk a lot about the labor movement. I see nurses. I mean, anytime I go to a picket line with nurses, there is so much freaking energy. I mean, they're just like, uh, I get energized on the picket line. We had a nurse, Joseph, on our podcast, and I said, "Man, you guys are so like in the labor movement. You guys don't take any shit. You guys are like gangsters." And I was like, he's like, "Yeah, we are." And I said,
Well, I would say the organized, unionized ones are,
"Mm,
but unfortunately, the vast majority of nurses remain non-union. So we still
mm."
have a lot of work to do.
That's why we need podcasts.
I
Platform each
know.
other. That's really cool. And I think it's changed. You've been in nursing how long did you say?
Since right out of high school. So I think as an RN, like 20 years,
Uh-huh.
but I was a CNA for years before that. My
I've
whole
been
entire adult life, I've worked in nursing.
Wow, that and so I remember when the approval of labor unions like in 2003, 2004 was like 40%, but now it's like 71%. It's the highest
Mhm.
approval since like 1965. And then a recent statistic came out, 75% of Americans support workers who go on strike for higher wages and benefits. What do you see out there, like your perception, the vibe?
Yeah, I think that's true outside of the healthcare industry, unfortunately. I get really excited hearing statistics like that, but I know that unfortunately, more often than not, when nurses go on strike, we are just affronted with the age-old question, well, who's going to take care of the patients?
Hmm.
And then the empathy manipulation starts, and, all of, it's a privilege to be a nurse. It's a calling, and all of that crap that they have used to manipulate us for generations start. So we don't often get the support of the public because they see us as abandoning patients. Even when it's a legally protected strike and we've done all the things by the book, they still accuse us of abandoning patients.
Interesting, interesting. And a lot of the issues I see in strikes is like safety, like patient care. It's some of these multi-million, multi-billion dollar hospital, the industry. Um, I think a lot of times you strike for things that would benefit the patients. Do you
Oh,
see?
100%. But the public doesn't understand that,
Mm,
They think that we're greedy and we're just out there striking for more money or something. They don't understand that nurses go on strike for their patients.
mhm,
The number one reason we are on strike is unsafe working conditions, primarily being nurse to patient ratios, the amount of patients assigned to nurse, right? And what the public doesn't understand, I'll throw you some stats, is for each additional patient that a nurse is assigned beyond the recommended ratio for that specialty, each one of those patients have between a 7 and 10% increased risk of death or serious complication. So
wow.
that means that if the recommended ratio for that specialty is 4 patients to one nurse, and yet they give the nurse, say, 6 patients, but it could be 7, 8, 9, 10. That means that all of those 6 patients now have between a 14 and 20% increased risk of death or serious complication because the nurse simply cannot be in all those places and does not have the time to catch the very nuanced signs and symptoms that would head off those kind of complications. So I don't know about you, but I'm not okay with those odds. If myself or a loved one is hospitalized, I am not okay with knowing that they have on the low end, a 7% increased risk, or maybe a 40% increased risk of death or serious complications, simply because the hospital is greedy and doesn't want to hire as many nurses as they should.
I know we earlier we were talking about chemistry and you're talking about all the different requirements of nursing, but there's also I see an emotional component to nursing because people aren't going, they're hurting, they're coming to the hospital. Sometimes they need that for nursing nurses that come in, they it's almost, I know when I go in I always feel like I get calmed down even when they say, oh well, you have an infected bursa, you're going to go into surgery right now, but I'm all I'm surprised, but I'm always like it just seems that they 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 communicate in a way with patients that they put them at ease. And I think it would be difficult for nurses to be able to do that if they're so stretched so thin.
Oh, it is. You know, all of the little extra things go out the window when we are stretched that thin. And primarily time spent talking to your patients, time spent helping them with things that are not considered critical at the moment. So, helping them, get up to brush their teeth or walk in the hallway or any of these other things that are going to make them more comfortable, changing their soiled bed linens, anything like that. That all gets thrown out the window because we just simply don't have the time.
Well, well, it's one of the reasons we wanted to dedicate this month, Nurses is November on the UnionorBust podcast, because people, you go to the hospital, you're like, okay, I'm I need to go to the emergency room, so I go to the emergency room. That's all I'm thinking, but there's a whole system in place, you know, and everyone is like different functions of the system, getting the person checked in and then, then the insurance and getting people. I, how complicated is it for, give us a breakdown of, okay, I'm going to go to the emergency room and I check in. What happens with the first patient?
Well, I have to say I'm not an ER nurse. That's not my area of expertise. But in general, you're going to get triaged first.
Okay.
And so the triage nurse is going to rank you according to the severity of what they're seeing, what symptoms you're reporting. And so that means that if you are not what we consider critical, even though you might be in pain, you might think that you're more critical than we do, you're going to perhaps sit there for hours and hours and hours because there's going to be more people coming in even after you that are more critically ill that will take priority, and also because emergency rooms are so severely understaffed as well. They simply don't have the nurses in there to take care of the patients or the beds, the empty beds to put you in.
Mm.
So it all starts there. It's a waiting game.
It's a waiting game. And so s- now nurses are very vocal when it comes to, let's say, Medicare for all, universal health care. They're one of the, I know I see a lot of unions supporting that. What are your thoughts? Would this be a benefit to um, the system, the hospital system that we're in?
Look, no matter how you feel about that subject, the fact of the matter is our current healthcare system in this country is beyond broken, and we need to do something drastically different. If you or loved one has been hospitalized anytime recently, then you probably have your own horror stories, and it's getting worse by the day. So, whether or not you think universal healthcare is a good idea, at this point, anything is better than what we're doing. It's that dangerous to be in the hospital right now. So we've got to do something drastic. But I will tell you also that I'm half Czech. And so a lot of my family is in Europe. And so I have seen the benefits through them of universal health care. And yeah, I'm for it. I'm all for it.
Very, very cool. And why do you think there's this? Because I know that, w well, Remember, we're the Union Bus podcast. We get funding, grants, and stuff like that. So we got to be careful. We can't support candidates anymore or propositions. So we're part of the system now. You can
Uh-oh.
say whatever
Uh-oh.
you want, but it is interesting that we come from California, and our we were actually have CalCare was a big thing. We've had Hollywood for CalCare on our podcast, talking about, state California is as big as a country, and behind the scenes, it went away. Is it is it about the money? Does it all come down to money? Is it perception? Is it
It's 1,000% about the money. The healthcare system everywhere is all about making as much money as you can. The largest labor group of employees in any healthcare organization, regardless of hospital, nursing home, home health, rehab, it doesn't matter. The largest workforce is always nurses. And so, because we cannot bill for nursing services like providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistant, they are able to bill for their services. We still have an archaic system in which nursing is rolled into the daily room rate. So you get your bed, your room, your plastic water pitcher, your pillow, and your nurse. And it's all rolled into one. We are that devalued. So I say all this to point out that they don't make money off of us as they should. We need for Centers for Medicaid and Medicare to develop a reimbursement model for nursing. But until or unless they do, we are viewed by hospital organizations, by healthcare organizations as a necessary evil that costs them a lot of money. And that translates into our working conditions and how we are treated. But it's all about the money, always. You know, anyone that has chief before their title in the healthcare organization is making an obscene amount of money. And that's just base pay. They don't even talk about all the bonuses. And oftentimes, for example, nurse managers, their bonus is based on essentially how much they screw their unit out of. So if they can get away with using like three nurses under their par, then they get X amount of bonus. You know, if it's only two nurses, well, then they get less. So they're financially incentivized to not only screw nurses, but to put patients in harm's way. So, just on the surface, right? That's already a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, there's we had Carolyn O'Riordan on our podcast, and she brought up something that was really interesting. And Max Cotterill too. Shout out Max. Shout out Caroline. So during COVID, she said that hospitals, the insurance companies, I should say, made record profits
Mhm.
because they weren't. Everything was closed down, and they didn't provide care, going for regular physicals, regular checkups,
Yeah.
so insurance companies made record profits. And it's interesting, like they
Yeah.
made record profits when they weren't giving the care. It so it's like it this privatized system that we're in, by not providing the care, by getting down from four nurses to three nurses, that's enabling the system to just allow the profit driven mentality. Like I don't think about that when I go to the hospital. I just think about, hey, I love this hospital. They're always really nice. They get me in there. Something's wrong, and there's just a whole thing that you all are dealing with behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'll piggyback onto that. It wasn't just the insurance companies that were making crazy amounts of money during COVID. It was also the healthcare organizations because a lot of them pocketed the federal funding that was really meant to be passed down to the frontline healthcare workers, right? And some did, there a few did the right thing and passed it down, and we were given hazard pay and things like that. But by and large, they pocketed those funds. And we're talking in the millions.
Wow.
Where did it go? We didn't see it. We didn't see it. Meanwhile, we're dying left and right.
Mhm.
We're not being given a freaking mask, the most basic thing in the world, and they're stockpiling the masks in the office, and they're making millions off of us. It's absolutely a sin what they did.
And I want to remember what you said, that it's the system is beyond broken.
Yes.
People right now are living paycheck to paycheck. The inflationary pressures, I think 60% of the US population is living paycheck to paycheck. People are having trouble affording their rent, bills and all this thing. And I just don't even see, and they have to pay these exorbitant amount of fees for healthcare. Healthcare has just skyrocketed no matter who's in office.
Oh, yeah. And one of the bitter ironies is that nurses and healthcare workers often have the worst healthcare coverage themselves. We're the ones providing the healthcare, and yet our insurance plans that our employers offer are often amongst the worst and the most expensive. It's really just, adding insult to injury.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Um, Now, Nevada, you're from Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, that is a right to work state or unions? Is it? Do you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it
I've
is?
worked for a couple places that are unionized, but it was like open shop.
Gotcha.
Um, we don't have too many unions here, unfortunately. We need more. In
And
healthcare, that is. I mean, like if you're down on the strip, in the tourism industry, there's a ton of
mhm.
unions there representing those workers, but not in healthcare.
Well, I think they need you down there in Las Vegas, Nurse Erica, because it's interesting because when I think of nursing, I think of you because you're
Oh,
out there kind of, you're talking podcasts and my partner and I were just kind of a couple knuckleheads that kind of wanted everyone to have health care. And we're like, let's start a podcast. And then we just started a podcast. I think what's kind of going on right now in social media, because you are a big influencer on TikTok. And if anyone wants to follow, that's the Nurse Erica on TikTok, Instagram, all the platforms. Are you on Twitter too? Or X, I should say?
I don't do much, but it's at Nurse Be Brave on Twitter, but I'm mostly primarily on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and I need to work on my YouTube some more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's, we both have full-time jobs. I'm a union representative. He's a union organizer. Juan Perez, organizing monster, who does the podcast with me. Um, it's just we want to do this full time, and that's our goal, is to get more,
Same.
exactly. And it's like to get more of the narrative, because a lot of it has to do with the narrative, with the labor movement, talking about nurses. Oh, well, you said that. Oh, well, you're not giving patients care, but they understand actually they are striking for better care. They're trying to get something, for you all when you go in, and you don't have to wait, or you don't have to, like you said, when you take nurses away, the chances of death rise 7%, 10%. So, um, if 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 you wanted to give some advice to someone who wanted to get into nursing, what would you say? Where should they go first? Because a lot of times people are like, oh, nursing. What's the first thing they need to do?
Yeah. Well, they should follow me because I do have a plethora of information. But, I never want to dissuade anyone from becoming a nurse. But what I do want is for them to go in with their eyes wide open, so that not if, but when they are confronted with any kind of corruption, they won't be so caught off guard as I was. I really didn't know anything about my rights when I started out as a nurse. I had no idea what I know now. And it would have been so much easier of a journey for me had I known that. I always fought back, I'm proud to say, but I didn't win every fight, but I always learned and did it better the next time. So I would say educate yourself on your employment rights in your state and know what employers can and cannot do. And the same way that you have to document in the medical chart to CYA to cover your, what, you also need to be thinking along those lines as an employee. So always in the back of your mind thinking about creating a paper trail. If and when this seemingly innocent conversation goes south, how can I prove it? Always be documenting and having a paper trail and have copies at home of everything because unfortunately the reality is that retaliation against nurses is just off the charts, and that is for doing the right thing. When nurses report safety concerns, any kind of mistake that they witnessed, whether it's theirs or someone else's, when they say that they don't feel safe at work because they just found a gun in a patient's room, anything that they're reporting that they're obligated to be reporting, they are then retaliated against and often pushed out the door, terminated, or made um, so miserable of working conditions that they finally quit on their own. So go into nursing with your eyes wide open, knowing your rights, and always be thinking about covering yourself every day at work.
Well, um, Nurse Erica, these podcasts, we shoot for 20, 30 minutes. Is there anything else that you would like to say um, to about the labor movement, about anything, any anything else?
Yeah, we have a big problem in the nursing profession with scab nurses. I think more so than in any other profession, perhaps, because they use the whole, someone has to take care of the patients thing to their benefit. And we all know how damaging scabs are in any workforce, any industry, but in particular, it's really a problem in nursing, and that is a big part of why we cannot move forward. So, if you are working in a healthcare setting and there's a strike, even if you're there as say, a travel nurse under contract, you're a scab if you cross that line, whether
Mm.
you like it or not. The bottom line, you don't cross the line.
No.
Regardless of your situation and the details, you don't cross the line and you don't sell out your entire profession so that you can make a quick buck, because that speaks volumes about your complete and utter lack of character, right? So that's a big problem in nursing. And I think people need to really have their eyes open to that and understand how strikes work and the labor movement works. It's not about someone has to take care of the patient. That's not how it works. They're given their 10-day legally required notice to do the right thing, to transfer patients out, to stop admitting, to cancel elective surgery. They don't do that because it's all about money, right?
Mm.
So now that nurses are finally finding their voice the last few years, don't set us up for failure. Don't sabotage us because you're greedy. Support nurses that are on strike because we're doing it for the right reasons.
Well, Nurse Erica, I've seen some of your content. I definitely would not be messing with you if I was an office administrator, exposing myself to liability. But yeah, I appreciate all that you do. And what's the name of your podcast partner that you do it with?
Well, the name of the podcast is Nurses Uncorked.
Yeah. Mhm,
And my co-host's name is Nurse Jessica Seitz. She's also all over social media
mhm.
as well. But yeah, give our podcast a listen because we have a lot of really valuable information. And a lot of it is labor movement and union related.
That's what it's all about. Solidarity.
That's right.
All right, Nurse Erica. Thank you for for
Thank
being
you
here.
for having me.